Yeah, welcome to everybody attending or watching afterwards. And the purpose of this panel is to talk a little bit about jobs. And we have three Schulich Leader alumni that are all off working in very different and really interesting jobs. And we're going to get their perspective a little bit on what it's like to transition into the workforce, whether that means co-op or full-time jobs, because everybody in the network's at like different stages. So I think that's really cool. And I'll take a couple minutes just to introduce the three panelists. So first we've got Charles Nellis, who is a UOttawa CivEng alumni from 2019. And he's currently a deputy product manager for public services and procurement in the government. And although he's working at federal government right now, he's also interned at municipal government level, and he's worked in industry at Stantec. And secondly, we've got Nicole Shum, who's a Waterloo ChemEng from class of 2017, currently a manufacturing process engineer at Owens Corning. And she's done a wide range of co-op experience that ranges from tech, power generation, food, and industrial automation. And lastly, the third panelist is Grace Marcoux, who is from Memorial Process Engineer from 2018, class of 2018, and currently a quality supply chain leader at PepsiCo Foods, and also a wide range of co-op experience from energy industry, healthcare, and the food industry as well too. So what I'll do is I'll give each panelist maybe a minute just to give a little bit longer introduction, and then we'll get into the questions from there. Let's start with Charles.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Danny. So like Danny said, I'm a 2014 Schulich Leader, University of Ottawa. I did my civil engineering there, finished in December 2018, originally from Sudbury, Northern Ontario. During my degree, I did participate in the co-op program where we had four well, I can't find the word in English, for co-op terms, four co-op terms, and I did three of them at the federal government, public services and procurement Canada, and one of them at Stantec, a civil engineering firm. And since I've finished my degree, I've been working at public services and procurement Canada as a project manager in real property. I've been working on the Place du Partage. I've been working in the sector that works on the rehabilitation of major crown buildings, so very large office buildings. So I've been working since on the Place du Partage Phase 3 rehabilitation project, which is about $1 billion base building and fit up project that focuses on, it's basically a midlife retrofit of a 40-year-old building, from all the HVAC systems, everything.
Cool, that's awesome. Next we'll go with Nicole.
All right, cool. So hi everyone, or everyone who's gonna look at this recording after. As Danny said, I'm a Schulich Leader from the 2012 class, so I'm one of the first cohort. I'm originally from the West Coast. I'm born and raised in Vancouver, BC. I moved out to Waterloo back in 2012 to go to university. I did 6 co-ops during my time there. I was a chemical engineering student. I did co-ops at Maple Leaf Foods, Suncor Energy, Rockwell Automation, Apple, and as well as Ontario Power Generation. So I did a wide variety of co-ops. It was great to try a lot of different industries, figured out what I liked and what I didn't like. Now I graduated in 2017, so I've been working at Owens Corning since then. I did a 2-year rotational program, which is like a new grad program that they call the Manufacturing Leadership Program. So what that is I did rotations in different parts of manufacturing. I graduated out of that program in May of this year, so now, or May of last year, so now I'm there full-time as a process engineer.
Awesome, and last but not least, let's go with Grace.
So my name's Grace Marcoux. I'm from Hillsborough, New Brunswick. I was Schulich Leader class of 2013, and I did a Bachelor of Engineering in Process Engineering at Memorial University of Newfoundland. I did 5 co-op terms during my time there, all at different companies, different industries. I graduated in 2018 and started working for PepsiCo after that. I've been with them for about 1.5 years now, I started out on the beverages side of the business. I had a position as a production supervisor and then a maintenance supervisor. And I recently moved to the food side of the business, so PepsiCo Foods. And I am currently training to take over as the quality manager or quality supply chain leader at the plant here in McInnis.
Awesome. And I just realized I didn't take a second just to introduce myself. So I'm Danny McInnis, Schulich Leader from 2015 and graduating this year from U of T in mechanical engineering. So let's dive into, we'll start with a couple general questions for everybody, and then we'll get into some specific ones after that. And if anybody on the feed does have any questions for any of the panelists, just put them in the comments and we'll bring them up as well. All right, so the first one, because all of you have started at your jobs relatively recently, can you describe what your first month was like as a full-time?
Mm-hmm.
And anyone can go ahead and start.
I can start first. So the first month is really a lot of the onboarding process. So that's a lot of going through all the different training. Like for myself, I work in a manufacturing plant. So I was going through a lot of the safety training, learning about the layout of the plant. And then a lot of it is also meeting a lot of the people in your department as well as the other departments. In the first month, I would say the onboarding process was taken a bit slower than my co-ops, just because co-ops for Waterloo, like we're only there for 4 months, so they generally speed up the onboarding process, whereas going to full-time, I think it was a bit slower. And then I started getting a lot of my projects probably after the 3rd week of starting full-time.
Awesome.
I would say my experience was very similar to Nicole's, also working in a manufacturing facility, but I did return to a facility where I had co-opted. So I was already really familiar with the team. It didn't really need a lot of introduction, but going more in depth on the onboarding, than when I was a co-op, we did go through that and some training. And for me, I was also lucky that I was able to have some overlap with the person that I was taking over from. So just spending a lot of time with them, having some opportunity to ask questions. And for me, since I was already familiar and not really new off the street, I really started into working and being responsible for different metrics after about 2 weeks.
Cool.
And for myself, well, I'd say me too. I returned when I didn't return to this when I started full time. I returned to PSPC, but was not the same. Was same kind of job, but not the same team at all. Not the same project. So the first one was still onboarding, meeting the team members, what they do, what's our structural organization. But from the task side, it was a similar thing, although the project weren't at the same. When I was a previous project as a co-op, we're more at a delivery stage. When I started, we're more at a planning stage, so it's a bit different. But what's been a bit of a challenge for me when I started is there was a co-op in the team, and the first day I started, it was like you have to take care of the co-op students. So that was interesting. But I mean, now it's fine, and I now have 2 co-op students. But yeah.
That's awesome. And actually that transitions me well, talking about co-ops, into the next question. So there are a lot of people in the network that are looking for internships, and they may even be looking for their first internship. So having all done co-op at some point, do you have any strategies or tips that you'd recommend for anybody trying to get their first internship or just trying to get an internship in general?
One thing that I found helped me a lot is that I was not married to a certain industry or a company. There were a lot of other folks in my class who were very set on, this is what I want to work in, this is what I want a job in, and that is all they would apply on. I did not feel that way, so I applied on pretty much any posting that even remotely interested me, which gave me a lot more opportunities to not only get a job, but also practice the whole process. So writing the cover letter, doing the interview, practicing for it, and all that sort of thing. So I think that was one thing. It really increases your chances of getting an internship if you apply for more.
And I would add, since now, oh,
yeah, you can go ahead.
okay. Since now I do review lots of resumes every term. And it's hard. Getting the first internship is really hard. And once you have that first internship, and if it's a good internship, then every door is open and everybody wants to in their interview list. But and what I would say is, if you don't have that first experience, that's very valuable. And you know what you've done is, which is more retail job, which is fine. Everybody needs to start somewhere. Is to, when you write your resume, is to, rather than do the task, go on the skills you develop, things like that. That's our thing. That are keywords that I know a lot of people look, because if you just said, oh, I've done the cash, well, that doesn't tell me anything. But if you use your organizational skills, if those kind of keywords, it really helps to get your resume out, because a lot of people have done cash at Tim Hortons in their first or second year, so things like that.
So just to add on to what everyone said before, I would say go out of your way to look for opportunities for internships. So if your university has any job fairs to go to, like definitely go to those. There's a lot of employers that are looking just for co-op students. Try to speak to older students that have completed internships that you're interested in. Maybe they can give you some tips on how to apply. I also did a lot of looking on different job boards too. So my school had like a co-op specific job board. So if your school has that, I would suggest looking through there. And then also Google and Indeed.com. There's a lot of different job sites you can look out for to try and find internships. Another thing is you need to have a really strong resume to stand out from everyone else. So try to seek out experiences, whether it's volunteer experiences, leadership with a club at your school, anything like that, something to make you stand out from the rest of the crowd. And if you have had previous work experience, like make sure to emphasize that on your resume too, because that helps a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, I think those are all really good points. And then let's jump into some of these specific questions. And if you find that, like, I've asked a question to one panelist, but you've got something else to add to it, feel free to jump in afterwards. Just cut me off, and that's totally cool. So why don't we start with Grace? And I guess having worked in like a number of different industries, like with your co-op, how do you find like when you're at a co-op for a certain amount of time, whether it's like a 4-month or a little bit longer, how do you identify the difference between like liking the job versus like knowing that you want to go back? Because I think you interned at PepsiCo previously, and then now you've returned as a full-time. So there must be something that like really grabbed you about PepsiCo.
Mm-hmm. So having done, like I said, I did 5 different co-op placements throughout my degree. That really gave me a good sense of what I enjoyed during work and what I didn't like so much. So something that I discovered was that I really like to be hands-on. I like to be like in the action, which while I was interning at PepsiCo was something that I was able to do. And when I found out about the opportunity as a new grad, I knew it would be a similar type of gig, so I knew what I was getting into there. But additionally, I would say really the team and the environment and the manager in the position, if you're able to be going back to the same place that you've co-opted and you've been able to create a good relationship or felt like a connection with the people you've been working with, for me, I found that that was the biggest thing that drew me back to a place, as long as I didn't really dislike the work. My manager at that placement was extremely caring. I really felt like he wanted me to succeed. He went out of his way to, like, I did that co-op and then I had the opportunity to go back for a second one, but I didn't. but he still reached out to me about the opportunity for like a new grad position. So just knowing that you have a team and a manager who wants to help you succeed and wants to help you grow your career was really important to me. That was probably the biggest factor.
Yeah, I like that you put emphasis on the manager too, because I know my previous.
You might be muted, Dan.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, let me just turn this. How about now?
Yeah, can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I like that you put emphasis on the manager, because at my previous co-op, that was the first time where I felt like my manager took on like a mentor role.
I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Can everybody else hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, can you hear everybody else, Chris? Oh.
Maybe it's just on Grace's side.
Yeah, it might be.
Oh, maybe she has to reconnect.
I'll be back.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'll continue. One thing that I really liked that she brought up about the manager was I found that at my previous internship, that was the first time where, like literally from day one, I felt that my manager took on like a mentor role versus, like I've had great managers, don't get me wrong, throughout all my co-ops, but this guy in particular was really good at not only like making sure that I was achieving my goals at work, but like trying to figure out where do I want to go within the company and what kind of projects that I want to work on. So I thought that was really cool, and it made the experience 10 times better. So I really enjoyed that. Okay, let's jump to a question for Charles. So having worked in both industry and government, you probably saw some similarities and some differences. Can you speak a little bit about those?
Well, that's a great question, because before I've done my internship at Stantec, I had worked at, I had even just summer jobs, even in high school. I worked at the government of Ontario, the city of Ottawa, the federal government. And Stantec was really my first experience in the private sector. And I was really excited about it because, especially in Ottawa, it's hard to get, most 80% of co-ops end up in various federal government departments. It's really hard to get a co-op firm, especially in an engineering firm. It's very hard. So I was really excited about it. And no, to me, I've never enjoyed my co-op term at Stantec in the private industry. Maybe it's just me, but I find it, for me, it was, the first week was very a shock. Like just the culture and the way, like, I don't know, just the way things work. And what always had bothered me is the billable time that every 15 minutes is counted, and just, I just found it drove me crazy. I couldn't stand it. But yeah, I guess for some people they like it. It's obviously a lot more hands-on than what I do and what I will ever do. But yeah, it's been the way, like, I don't know, it is profit driven. It's the way it is, especially engineering firms are very, because the margin of profit is very low. So it's very severe, but yeah, on that. But I guess it depends on your priorities, what you want. And yeah, but I know, like, when starting in engineering, especially depending on the type of engineering, it depends. But in civil engineering, it's often government or engineering firms. It's two main choices. And when you start an engineering firm, the first 4 years are really difficult. You work a lot of hours. The pay is not that good. After it can pick up, but yeah. That's been my observations. But I've encouraged, like, every co-op students I've had, I've always encouraged them to look into the private sector, to try it out. But, yeah.
Cool, that's awesome. Hey Grace, can you hear us now? Okay, awesome.
I had to restart my computer. I don't know what happened.
Oh, okay. One thing I was saying before you had left the call was just that I had a manager at my previous internship that was like incredible in terms of like being a mentor versus just like managing you. So I thought that was really cool that you brought that up. Okay, so next question will be for Nicole. So I noticed that you're in a leadership program, a leadership manufacturing program at Owens Corning. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for your job and what that means day to day? And yeah.
Okay, so I was hired through that program, and what it is Owens Corning, they kind of selected people for this program to train them for future leadership positions in the company. So pretty much the company has kind of said, okay, we've chosen you guys to be in this program. We're looking for you guys to be in leadership positions in the future. So part of the rotational program that I was in was I did a rotation in process engineering for the first year. So I was learning about the technicalities, or sorry, the technical side of the business. The next rotation was in operations. So I was a production supervisor for about 6 months. In that role, I got to look after, you know, the plant, the shift people that I was working with, making sure the product we were making was good. And then after that, I did a rotation in the maintenance side of things. So I was looking after planning and scheduling for major downtimes. And after that, there's a optional portion where you can do a cross-functional rotation. I didn't do that, but that's just an opportunity for you to go into something non-technical. So you can go into HR, sales, any of the other functions like warehousing, supply chain, things like that. Day to day, I wouldn't say it really was a big difference versus being a regular job per se. But I do think with the program, like you get to meet the leadership of the company. So they actually took us down to the headquarters in the US and we got to meet, you know, the CEO, the vice presidents, kind of get those networking opportunities. And then also as a graduate of the program, we're also given kind of the inner track to leadership positions per se. So if you have a certain part of the company that you want to get into, the program leader like gets in touch with you. She kind of goes through like different opportunities that are available. So I would say versus a regular entry level position, this one you're kind of more mentored, you're kind of given more assistance in trying to get to different places of the company.
Cool, I like that, that's awesome. Okay, so next question is for Grace. And so you mentioned that you studied process engineering, and I know that process engineering can be applied to like a wide range of industries. So how do you recommend for somebody that is in a program that is pretty broad, how do you narrow in on like what your interests are?
Well, I would say the best way to do that is through co-op. So if you have the opportunity to do co-op, I would absolutely 100% recommend that you take advantage of that. Because for myself, I didn't start out at university in engineering. I switched from science into engineering after my first year based on a recommendation from my mom. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. I just knew that I liked math, I liked the technical side of things, and I liked chemistry. So that's why I ended up in process engineering. So having the opportunity to try these different industries, I did a work term that was research-based as well. So that gave me kind of an insight into what a postgrad would be like if I decided I wanted to do a master's or PhD. That was really how I was able to decide what I liked and what I didn't like when it came to the real life application of engineering. And also talking to your peers. Like I had a great group of friends within my class, and we would talk during our school terms about our work term experiences. So I got to sort of by osmosis learn about other industries as well.
Cool. We'll go next question with Charles. So being from Ottawa myself, I've got a lot of friends that have worked in government as well, whether co-op or full-time. And one thing that always amazes me about them is how they're able to, I guess, navigate like how complex the government is in terms of like all the departments and everything. So how do you recommend for somebody who is interested in applying to government to find like the department that's for them?
Well, it's a good question. It really depends on your stream of work and the mandate. Engineering and the fact, if you want to stay in it, it depends on the stream of work and what the department does. Basically, look up the mandate of the departments and then you'll see what they do. But I mean, one of the best way, just a general advice, one of the best way to get into federal government the easiest way to get into federal government permanent after as a career is to get a co-op term. Because after you can be bridged in and you don't, I got a permanent position without having to do a competition, an interview. Well, I did an informal interview, but there was no formal test, which you would normally, if it would apply after school, it could take up to a year before getting somewhere.
Oh.
So that's one of the best advice. And to create, and when you're a co-op term, to do, because sometimes you're in a team, but there's not really any possibility to stay within that team, but you have opportunity to network within other directors and tell to your director, well, I'm interested. Do you know any directors that need people? So that's a good way. And essentially navigate, like government, it's classification. I'm in an engineering role, so my classification is ENG. Well, there's only a certain number of departments that have roles that are ENG engineer. So that's the way to look at it. And there's although I'm in engineering, I have engineering classification, I'm in a fairly non-technical position because I'm in project management, but there's people, depending where you are at national defense, there's a lot of engineers that do actual engineering as civilians, not as civilians. You don't need to be military to be at national defense. But yeah, it's to look at the mandates. But even here at PSPC, I have some friends that did civil engineering, and some of them, they work in dams because we own dams all across the country. So they actually, every day, they control the level of the dams. I have people that maintain bridges, that inspect the bridges in national capital area. So every week they go and walk on their bridges. So yeah, there's a lot of variety. It's to look up what every department does. And yeah, but yeah, that's about it.
Cool. Okay, that's great. And then now next question would be for Nicole. And I guess this one could apply to everybody. So afterwards, if anybody else has a comment on it, feel free to jump in. So having worked at a bunch of different companies like through Waterloo's co-op program, I guess I was curious to see what your perspective was on corporate culture and how that makes a difference for jobs, and if you've noticed much of a difference between jobs you've been at before.
Sure. Okay.
I know it's kind of like a loaded,
it's
a big question, but
it's a big question, but I'll try my best. So like you said, working at a lot of different co-ops, it means I worked at a lot of different companies. I would say there are differences between companies in terms of corporate culture. So I did work in like the private sector, and I also did more of public sector as well while working at OPG. You can see the difference in terms of the speed at which like projects are done. So for example, at OPG, I worked at a nuclear plant. So obviously it's very heavily regulated. So if you try to push any projects through, like it has to go through like a kind of a slower regulatory process. That's just the nature of being in nuclear. Everyone wants to make sure that what you're doing is safe and it's, you know, within regulations. Versus where I work now, which is Owens Corning, it's a very hands-on job. The projects that we do it moves a lot quicker for sure. And I guess people are more willing to try different things, whether it means that they succeed or not, that's different. But a lot of people are willing to try a lot of different innovative things, whether it's to improve the production line or to increase yield, for example. I would say the people that you work with, that really impacts the corporate culture as well. I've been in a lot of different places where that was a negative corporate culture. So I've had, you know, like places where maybe it's more of a toxic work environment. And I think that's why going through co-op, it really helps you learn about how to navigate different situations, whether it's a positive situation or a negative position. Like how do you deal with, let's say, a negative manager, for example. yeah, I guess it really depends on your team. That's a big impact on kind of the workplace culture as well. So I think getting your foot in the door and trying out different co-op terms, you can kind of figure out what type of environment you like to work in, whether it's a more fast-paced environment or maybe you like to do more regulatory side of things. So that's what I have on that question.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. Thank you. So I'm thinking now we don't have any questions from the network, so why don't we jump to a couple more general ones and then we'll wrap things up if we don't get any questions. So the first one is, can you describe your favorite project that you've worked on at your job so far? I know you may not be able to get into like details, but just like a general, like why you enjoyed it and what was different about it than others. And that's for anybody. Yeah, you can go ahead if you go.
I can go first. So probably one of my top projects was when I was working at Apple. I worked for the hardware reliability team. Can't really get into too much detail, but I worked on the display, so a display of different products, including the Apple Watch and the iPad. I would say it was probably one of my favorite projects because at the time it was top secret on what I was working on. And then after I finished my co-op term and like a year later, I actually got to see it in store on an actual product. So I think that was really cool just because you worked on something and then you actually get to see it like impacting how people use the product. I think that's also why I'm working at Owens Corning right now. Where I work, we're making fiberglass insulation. So whatever projects we work on to improve the product or increase yield, like you actually see that product in stores and people are buying it, they're using it. It's nice to see something come into fruition, I guess, that everyone sees.
It's like a validating feeling, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
For me, I would say one of my work terms actually was with Worley Parsons, which is a international contracting company, and it was working on the construction of an oil platform in Newfoundland. So it was a mega project, and I was there in the commissioning phase, and I worked with the instrumentation and controls team. So really, my work term was very electrical based. I think in terms of knowledge and background, they would have been maybe better off with an electrical student, but they got me. And so I had a lot of opportunity to learn during that work term, just working with the electricians, the technicians, the engineers, and like being there and learning how communication worked and how this wire would go to this box and then go here, reading a drawing that would show the wiring, and having to sort of, some of the tasks that I had to do was kind of like checking off that request for work had been completed. So I had to like go into the panels and check and see what was done. So I think I enjoyed it so much because I was able to learn so much, and it was pretty cool also to be working in like a 8-story oil producing platform.
That's awesome. It's really cool. And Charles?
And for me, I'd say, well, my 3 co-op terms at PSBC, I really enjoyed them. I was always at the same project, so it was the Carling Campus project, which was the renovations fit up of the old Nortel Networks headquarters in West Ottawa that the federal government purchased back in 2008 to become the new national headquarters for the National Defence of Canada. So that was very interesting. And like you said, Danny, the manager makes a big difference. And in that work term, I had always the same manager, and he really made a big difference in the fact that I came back and I stayed in the government at PSBC in the end. And she's now a senior project manager in another project, but we still talk to each other very often. And he's still a good mentor to me because, you know, I'm a newly starting project manager, and I'm still able to ask him questions about what would you do in this situation. No, but it's been a very interesting project. It's not done. Well, I think they're finishing March 31st, but you know, because there's the number of rooms there. Even because to do my work, I didn't know what to do, what they would do in this room, but I knew they were top secret rooms, and it's quite fascinating. And yeah, and actually what really helped me in that term is that in my last term, the last 2 months, my supervisor, a project manager, got a promotion as a senior project manager, and he ended up leaving quite quickly to the other project. So I was the one that stayed there, and I was able to because he trained me. But in the last 3 months, I stepped up and acted like almost a full project manager, although I was just a student. And I think that really helped me to, you know, get that edge to stay in PSPC afterwards. But you know, it was a great work term. And even the team was awesome, because even today, like, I talked to some people that have left that team and went always, and they're like, and we always say, oh, I don't think we'll ever be able to replicate the spirit that we had at Carling campus. But really a special place to work.
That's cool. And the Nortel one, that's the big glass building that you're talking
Yes,
about?
the tower you can see from the highway.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. And then I guess the last question is based on something that I know we've talked a little bit about it at like the SLX Canada event through, I think, one of the leader talks. But one thing that I think is a common feeling for like young people going into jobs is imposter syndrome. And for those who don't know what that is, it's like when you may be qualified for a role, and a lot of Schulich leaders definitely are qualified for the roles they're going into, but you always got that feeling that maybe you're the youngest one in your department or something like that, that just makes it difficult. And can you talk a little bit about either what that's like, or if you've got any tips for how to deal with imposter syndrome when starting a new role? And that's for anybody who'd like to take a crack at it.
Well, I think it's an interesting question, because as a project manager, the word you say, they have, you know, if I say do that, that can have several thousands of dollars and an impact. It can impact, you know, the words I say have an impact on the work people do for me. So, and like, I mean, consultants and stuff like that. So sometimes I'm like, I'm here and I'm like, I have in that room. I've been facing a situation where I was the only, anyway, because we have I know it's hard to recommend, but the government, we still have clients because we serve other government departments, we have consultants, and I end up often being the only representative from my team, because anyway, the most senior person wasn't there, and I need to give directions on how we move forward. And sometimes I'm like, I'm in a room with 20 people, and I'm like, good God, I'm only 23, what do I do? So yeah, sometimes it is hard, and it's a lot of pressure, and but I mean, like, you've put in that position, you do what you can. And I mean, my tip too is you don't need to tell everybody you're only 22, 24. Maybe they'll think you're a bit older, and that's fine. But you just need to, like you said, we've qualified. We've done what we had to do to get into this position. And but at the same time, it's important. Like, if you really feel like this situation is just above you, it's important to ask for help. More senior people, mentors. Like, what would you do? I just don't know what to do. Because you know what? There's always a first. And I'm sure I'm not done going through my first situations of I don't know what to do. I've never seen this. So yeah.
I like that.
I would agree. I would say from my point of view, I've so far for the last year and a half in my positions worked as a manager of unionized employees or frontline employees. So that can be difficult to maneuver, but it can also be an asset. In PepsiCo, particularly, the management positions have very high turnover, whereas our frontline employees, very low turnover. Most of them have worked there for their whole career. So if you're able to build a relationship with them, then they can help you out in a lot of situations because they've seen pretty much everything before. So that's something that has really helped me to have the ability to ask more knowledgeable people, even though technically they're my reports, being able to ask them for their opinion or what they've done in a similar situation before to help move forward has really, I do that a lot.
I would say for imposter syndrome, kind of what helps sometimes is just to kind of reflect on how you got to where you are today. I think sometimes when you're working, you kind of get caught in the day-to-day things and you kind of don't take the time to just reflect, okay, how did I get here? So I think sometimes just, you know, taking the time to update your LinkedIn or taking the time to go through your resume and look at things that are on there, it kind of jogs your memory like, hey, yeah, I did achieve that, or hey, I worked there before, or hey, I got a Schulich Leader Scholarship. Yeah, I'm an amazing person. But I really do think taking the time to reflect on your achievements of how you got to where you are today really helps, because it reminds you that, yeah, I achieved all these things. And that also kind of helps you in future situations when you're networking, because people will ask you when you're networking, like, oh, what type of jobs have you had before? And if you take the time to kind of reflect on where you worked before or what you've done, then it comes up easier and more natural in conversations when you're trying to, so to speak, sell yourself to a future employer. So I think reflecting and taking the time to go through your resume helps a lot.
Yeah, I like the point you made about like taking time to reflect, because I think today with like social media and like all the information that's like thrown at us, we don't take that much time to like look back and reflect. So I think that's a really good point. I like that.
I would say too, just one more thing to build on that as well, Nicole. I've found that asking for feedback from your manager can also help put things into perspective as well, because you might be thinking that you're in over your head or you're not delivering on things that you should be delivering on. But if you can sit down with your manager and talk to them about that, like how am I doing versus what you're expecting, you might realize that you're doing pretty much what they want and maybe even more. You might just be having really high expectations of yourself that aren't that attainable.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And I think it's like, it also goes back to the idea of like, when you are feeling that way with like imposter syndrome, it's really easy to kind of like get in your head. And I think we always assume that we've got more eyes like watching every move that we're doing. And I think just to know that like you definitely deserve the role that you've gotten to. And obviously we're young and we've got room to grow. That can be really comforting as well. So yeah, I think that kind of sums up what you guys were talking about. And we don't have any specific questions from anybody. So what I'll do is I'll wrap it up here. I think this is really good. Does anybody have any final thoughts? Panelists? No? Okay.
No, good.
All right. No, I think everyone will really appreciate you guys taking the time to share your experience, both when you're doing co-ops in school, but also now as full-times. And I think as the network grows, that becomes really interesting, because there will be a lot of us transitioning into full-time roles. So thank you for taking the time to share that info. And yeah, on behalf of the Schulich Network, I think you've done us all a huge favor by just giving us like an hour of your time and sharing all the insight that you've built up over the years. So thank you and good luck in your jobs.
Thanks for having us.
Oh,
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. All right. Have a great day. See ya.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.